Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and today we are talking about Oz because the most popular video on my channel by far is my Oz collection video. And so I was thinking about Oz the other day and I thought, I do want to read another Oz book, and I know I have some that I have not read yet. So I went ahead and I picked up the next book in the series that I haven't read, and that is Captain Salt in Oz. Now, yes, this is an old edition of the Captain Salt book. So this one you can see there are different styles of the Riley and Lee publisher logo that are on Oz books. So this one is a particular edition. It's not an original first printing or anything like that. It has this little cut out here a little bit, and it doesn't have any color plates because at this point in the series, they didn't do color plates anymore in the Oz books. This is book number 30, I believe, in the Oz series, written by Ruth Plumly Thompson. And okay, Captain Salt and Oz, we gotta talk about this book. Now, I'm not gonna hold this book up here forever because this is a very old book and I don't wanna just hold on to it the entire time because I don't wanna hurt it. So I actually did not read this particular edition of the book. I actually read an ebook edition of this book that has the original text and it had all of the original imagery illustrated by John R. Neal in that edition. So I didn't want to read this one because it's an old book and I don't want to damage it further because it already has a little tear and I don't want to hurt the pages, anything like that. It goes with my Oz collection, obviously. So I'm going to set it down, but I did want to show you this edition, and this is one of the ones that I have. It's a fun book, but we're going to talk about it. Now, first off, I have to tell you, I do love pirate stories. Pirate stories are one of my favorite kinds of fantasy stories. I especially love, all those Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I loved those storylines. I love the Pirates of the Caribbean Captain Jack Sparrow books that came out from Disney. I love pirate stories. Wayne Thomas Bassett actually has a 3-book pirate series that I love. The first book is called Isle of Swords, and then the sequel book was called Isle of Fire. And then he actually self-published a 3rd book in the series, and that one is called Isle of Stars, and he called it the Isle Chronicles. This one was a lot shorter than the other 2, but it was still a lot of fun. So I love pirate stories. Pirates in Oz was one of my favorite Oz books. I loved this book so much, where a lot of these characters are introduced that take place in Captain Salt in Oz. So in this book, you have the Captain Salt in it. You've got Atto, the ruler of the Octagon Isle. You've got the ship, the Crescent Moon. You've got so many fun elements that are already introduced. Roger the Reed Bird or Red Bird. I don't know which one it is. It depends. And you've got a lot of fun things going on in Pirates in Oz. So Captain Salt in Oz was kind of like a sequel to Pirates in Oz. And like I said, I love pirates. I think they're so much fun. However, you can tell that at this point in the series, Ruth Plumly Thompson was definitely kind of running out of material because this book was not as strong as many of the previous books that she had written. Ruth Plumly Thompson took over the Oz writing mantle from L. Frank Baum with book number 15, The Royal Book of Oz. And so from there on, from book 15 all the way through book 32, she wrote a ton of Oz books. And there's a lot of great ones in there. I love quite a few. I'm getting close to making a ranking video of all the Ruth Plumly Thompson books, and I will definitely put that up on the channel as soon as I finish reading all of them, because I'd never read Captain Salt in Oz until now. The only 2 I have left at this point of recording this video is book number 31, The Silver Princess in Oz, and then book number 32, I believe, which is Ozoplaning with the Wizard of Oz. I could be wrong. There might be 33. I could be off. I'm not totally sure. But I only have a couple left before I've read every Ruth Plumly Thompson in her original run. I have not read her book Yankee in Oz or The Enchanted Island of Oz. I haven't read those 2 yet. Those came later. They were published much later than the original run of them. So those are kind of the last 2 OG Oz books I have to read until I've read them all in the original run, because I've read the Jack Snow books, I've read the Cosgrove books, I've read the McGraw books, all of those. So and John Arneal's own books. So I've read all of the rest of them except for these two, and I've kind of been saving them, because it's a series that I love, and I've kind of been saving these because I just enjoy going to the world of Oz so much. There's so many fun things to explore and to see what's going on. However, sometimes that exploration turns into colonization, like it did in Captain Salt and Oz. So we got to talk about this because this book, like a lot of Ruth Plumly Thompson books in particular, is a product of its time. This book was written in the 1930s, and in the 1930s, imperialism and the idea of colonization of other places was a huge thing still. So that was a big part of especially United States of America's identity and culture. And that seeps into this book quite a bit, because what's happening in this book is Captain Salt is no longer a pirate. He's now a royal explorer for Oz. He is taking Oz banners and flags with him to go colonize islands in the Nonestic Ocean for Ozma. And he does say that the islands will be able to choose whether they want to accept to be part of Oz or not. They don't have to become part of Oz. Not every place they go to does become part of Oz, but quite a few do choose to become part of Oz. And not necessarily with all the information, in my personal opinion, but because I kept thinking about this, and I was thinking, one of the rules of Oz is that you're not allowed to practice magic if you're not the wizard, Glinda, or Ozma. And so that is like a huge thing you're not allowed to do. And these islands are not told that piece of information. There's like a lot of pieces of information that I feel like are not being shared with these islands that are being colonized in the name of Oz. So this is definitely an interesting thing to go into this book with. And I will say too, there are some unfortunate depictions of people groups in this book, which was really disappointing. But again, I know it's also a product of its time. And Ruth Plumly Thompson is, sharing her views coming through the Oz book in this particular case. One of the things that's really interesting, I was thinking about this, and I thought, should these older books be edited for this kind of content for today's readers? And I actually don't think so. I think that these books should be left alone. I don't think they should be edited for today's readers. I think that, publishers, if they want to, can put warnings in the front of reprints of these kinds of books to say, hey, here's some of the content that's going to be in this book that you should be aware of going into it. So I definitely think that is a good thing, but I don't think they should be edited, mainly because I think that these are a piece of history. And especially if someone were to do a dissertation or to do some sort of, look back at like how were people viewed in this time period in fiction, this would be an important piece of that puzzle for like a dissertation, a thesis, someone wanting to do a project of some kind on that subject matter. So I do think it's important that old books not be edited. And I think that we need to go into them knowing what's going on. And if it's something that you're thinking that I'm not going to be okay with that, don't do it. So that is kind of my opinion on the older book piece of this. Now, the question though is, okay, setting all of that aside, is this a good Oz story? Well, not really, in my opinion. First of all, we actually never go to Oz in this book, which is one of the only original run books that Oz is never visited. We're completely outside of Oz in the Nonestic Ocean. And I guess technically we go to Oz because those islands become part of Oz in one sense. But that's beside the point. There are a lot of fun adventure moments. There's some really great sequences in here of some action and wondering like, how are they actually going to get out of this? There's a really panic-inducing sequence where one of the characters gets trapped underwater and it's slowly filling up with water. And I thought, wow, this is actually really intense for an Oz book. And I know that no one can die in Oz. Like, that's not a thing that can happen. But I am curious what's going to happen in this particular case. Like, what's going to go on here? We also have a situation where there are lots of different reveals that are really obvious at this point. They become reveals. There's a couple characters that have some secrets and things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about yet. And when you do get introduced to those characters, you're like, I know what's going on here. This is this, and this is this, and this is this. And you can pretty much guess it. If you've read any other Oz books at this point, if you're reading Captain Salt in Oz, you've probably read other Oz books. You can probably piece together some of what is going on here. This book does rely a lot on Ruth Plumly Thompson's tropes that she used all the time in her Oz books. There's a lot of puns that are like the different places that they go to, and she does a lot with puns and phrases that are common phrases that then she takes and turns into realities. So you have a lot of things like that going on. You have, like I said, a lot of obvious reveals, but there was one that surprised me, and I thought, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. I didn't expect that to be the reason for this. And that was kind of fun. You have some great side characters here. Kobo, the hippopotamus, such a great character. I loved Kobo. I will say, I feel like Thompson didn't always know what to do with Kobo. It's this hippopotamus that ends up coming on the adventure with them. And I thought, oh, this is such a great Oz character. Like, in my opinion, I know to some people this might be blasphemous, but I think Kobo is up there with like the Hungry Tiger, Cowardly Lion, Kabumpo, like those sorts of animal companion characters that come along with the different Oz people. I really, really loved Kobo a lot. I also love Roger the Reed or Red. I don't know. It's a bird that reads. And so I'm not really sure which one it is. But I really love Roger. I think Roger is such a great character, has so many great moments and just fun things, and is really put to good use in this book. I feel like mostly all the characters have a moment to shine in this book where they are needed particularly for some task or thing that's happening in the book. And I really love when an author does that, and they don't just have a character that's just there to be there, but is a character that is, you know, contributing to the storyline and helping things along. So that is really well done. I do want to say, though, this book had an ending where all of a sudden we're like in a climax and this is happening and whoa, here we go. And that was kind of fun that there was that moment. It's another Ruth Plumly Thompson typical trope where we're traveling, villains, and we're fighting the villains, and then the end. And that's kind of how this book goes quite a bit. There's a lot of disconnected pieces, but then that ending section is all connected. So it's a little jarring to read it that way. So it's kind of an interesting thing in my personal opinion, but it's Thompson. It's totally Thompson. It's what Thompson does every single time. And I will say the very end did make me have that feeling of, I want to read another Oz book. I want to keep going. I want to keep exploring. I want to see what else is out there. And I think that is one of the strengths of an Oz fantasy book. It is high on the exploration, high on discovery, like seeing like what else is out there, piecing together some kind of a mystery, whether it's a good mystery or, like in this one, a not so great mystery. You still want to know all the pieces and what's happening. So overall, I did enjoy reading this book, but it had so many issues as well that it's hard for me to give it a good rating. So at the end of the day, I would have to give Captain Salt in Oz a 3 out of 5. And that might be a little generous too, but I did have fun with the pirate elements and I liked the very end, but there's some of those product of its time issues that are here, but also the storyline is a little bit typical. So it just is not as good of an Oz book. Like I would say if you never read Oz before, don't read this one. This is not the one to jump in with. I would go and, if you've never read Oz, go back and read The Wizard of Oz, because that's where it all started. I think that's a great place to start. And then I would read Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. And you can keep reading past those first 3 books, but I think you can, after that, kind of read wherever, because a lot of the storylines kind of build on each other a tiny bit, but not a ton. It's more like characters are introduced in an earlier book and they pop up over here, but there's no need to know their history or anything like that. So overall, this was a fun book, but like I said, I don't know if it's the best Oz book. I would probably skip this one, unless you're an Oz super fan and you want to read them all. And yeah, that's probably it. So until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.